Okay, so we have more people in the room now. We have about 12 people in the room, and this session is now being recorded. This is the very first edition of the Praxis series. The Praxis is simply a conversation series where we bring together school leaders from different parts of the world to share their knowledge and experience on leading educational systems and also leading schools. And it's a pleasure that we're having our very first session today and having to host Mr. John as our very first speaker for the Praxis series. My name is Stephen Loya, and I am an education strategist and program designer, and I'm based in Lagos, Nigeria. And today we are doing something I have been building for a while. The Praxis series, like I've said, is a conversation series I created for just one reason. I think that the best thinking about African education is not in policy, or it's not appearing on conference keynote. I think it's the best thinking is in offices where we have our school leaders and education leaders. And I also believe that this series would change how their knowledge is being transmitted and shared as well. So every session, I'm going to be sitting down with a school leader live on LinkedIn, except today, to talk honestly about what it takes to build great schools, what has worked for them, what hasn't, and what every educator watching can learn from their experience. And we call it the Praxis series because it is a place where thinking becomes doing. So Praxis is like the bridge between theory and action. And today, we are having the first one. Now, my guest today is the founding head and director of education at Charterhouse Lagos, Nigeria's first British independent school, and the largest private sector investment in education in this country. I think we want to celebrate that. Mr. John's career has taken him from the UK to Kenya to Singapore to Qatar to China and Nigeria, and now Nigeria as well. And he has built Charterhouse Lagos from the ground up. So from the construction, I can remember that from the groundwork, I have been following Mr. John's story on how he's transforming Charterhouse and down to curriculum execution, to recruitment, to the first day of school. Mr. John is a fellow of the RSA and the Chartered College of Teaching, and he has become one of the most trusted voices in educational development in Nigeria. Please welcome John Todd. Now, Mr. John, welcome to the Praxis series. And before we get into the substance of today's conversation, I want to give you your own space to set your own context, to set the record straight. So tell us briefly the story of how you ended up here in Lagos, Charterhouse, a school you built from nothing. How did you end up here?
So, yeah, it's a long story. I left the United Kingdom in 1996 for my first overseas job. And I'm not sure if I was excited or depressed that one of my former students is on here. It makes me feel old sometimes. But I've actually spent more of my career outside of my home country than inside. And I went to different places, and I came to Nigeria first in 2001. And I was head of Green Springs for 6 years. And my oldest two children were born here in Lagos, in Ikeja. And then we left. And at the time, we left for two reasons. One was we wanted our children to have a very British education. And to be honest, the medical services. We were in a hospital at night. My daughter had malaria, was on a drip. NEPA took the light. And we said, why? Why would we stay here when our children could have better opportunities elsewhere? And so we moved on. We went to the Middle East. And then I spent 10 years in China. And I was approached in Beijing at a garden party about a project in Nigeria. and I thought it sounded interesting because Nigeria simply doesn't have this type of school. And I had that experience of opening schools. I'd done it in China as well, and in the Middle East. And I thought, well, why not? This is an interesting project. And came out here and had a look. And I think what really attracted me to the project was the fact that I got to have a say in every aspect of the school design. Because very often you move in, somebody has built the school or designed the school. And this was an owner that actually wanted me to say, well, what does this look like? What do good learning spaces look like? So that was a really great opportunity to use all of that experience that I'd had over so many years. And there was also that piece that, you know, in Nigeria, there's that thirst for change, that thirst for development, and particularly in Lagos, that thirst for education. And so really we knew that in the long term, this is something that people would buy into. We knew people were fed up of sending their children overseas. And honestly, there was a gap in the market. You go to so many big cities and they all have really impressive, well-established international schools. Mainly British schools, but from other countries as well, American, Canadian, and so on. But British schools dominate the market, but not Lagos. There was nothing like it. So it was that chance to use my experience to do something new. If you've seen the school and you see the scale of it and it's breathtaking in so many ways. And it's very, very hard to turn down an opportunity like that.
Wow. That's a very interesting story I had to follow. And I think one of the things that you said that really stood out for me is you mentioned something about that there is a thirst for excellence. And yeah, Nigerians want a better education. They want better system, and understand that gap exists. You decided to be part of the whole design process, from the structure down to curriculum and how you even get to hire your talent. And I haven't been inside the facility, the structure, but I've watched multiple videos. I remember that when you started the foundation laying, I saw the videos of what you hope to achieve in the on the site, and by the time you go to one stage to the next stage, and when you had your first set of students coming to the school, I saw the videos and pictures, and it was breathtaking. And I think some months back, I passed just in front of Charterhouse, and I said, "Nah, this is magnificent." And I think that's a very good one from you, Mr. John Todd.
And I think as well, Stephen, it goes to show, you know, there's a lot of people that say you can't do these things in Nigeria. And certainly when I was here 20 years ago, we now have some really great hospitals. And a school like ours, people keep saying, no, it can't be done. And here it is. And there's another one open, and there's another one on the way. And we also kind of look at our school as we talk about a vote of confidence in the future of Nigeria. Because I think it does go to show, if you set your mind to it, if you have the patience, if you have the will, then anything really is possible here. And of course, if you have the money. But it is possible to successfully build and develop serious projects in Nigeria, and I think particularly in Lagos.
Yeah, you once led the school at Green Spring. That was many years ago. So when you came back to Lagos to start up to lead Charterhouse, and you said to take on this project, what was that thing you knew would be the hardest part? And were you right about it being the hardest part for you?
Belief is what I would say. Nobody believed, in a sense, firstly, that it was true. Lots of people come and sell you big ideas, big projects. Very, very hard to believe that we would do it, that it would get off the ground, that it would open, that we would be able to achieve anything. And we met all our milestones. We opened on time. And even in the second year, when we opened our secondary school, there was still a gap. People didn't believe that we could do it on time. We actually opened early. I think there's a huge challenge here because people have been promised so many times. There's so many white elephant projects that when something does work, people really need to be convinced. It's a bit like Thomas. They want to put their finger in the hole in the hand and make sure it really is there. And I get it. And so people are kind of doubly shocked when they walk up and they see it really is there. It sits in the landscape. It imposes itself on the landscape where we are, and it's built to such a high specification. And it's that double shock that these things are possible. And look, here it is. You can walk in, you can touch it. And we always knew that convincing people that this was real was going to be a challenge. That was our biggest worry. And it's slowly going away, because we're now about to start our third year in September. We're getting some really good market traction now. As a brand, we're much better known. We've, of course, had some very interesting memes. We've all heard of the 42 million Naira one. But our name is out there. And yeah, the biggest issue is convincing the market, convincing parents that it's going to happen and that this is a good place to send their children.
Yeah, and I think that you've fulfilled and met the expectation that it will exceed the expectation of many parents and stakeholders that have tried to understand what you're trying to build. You mentioned something about belief, and I think it goes. It says much about how much we trust our systems, and you've been able to change that narrative and have Nigerians believe in what you're trying to do here in Lagos, and that led to the establishment of two other international schools, one other international school, and one currently on the way. So I would say Charterhouse is like a pace setter when it comes to high investment in education in Nigeria. So let me start with the word itself, excellence. I think that excellence is one of the most used words in education and education sector in general. You hear school leaders and management talk about excellence a lot. And I think that it has stopped meaning anything at all. When you use it, when you say Charterhouse is built for excellence, what are you actually describing?
Yeah, it's a good thing to really think about. And where we started was thinking about values, and we started talking about what was the product we wanted to produce effectively. What type of children did we want to come out of our school? And we talk about excellence, respect, kindness, courtesy, a particularly Nigerian value, I thought. But excellence came through all along. And for me, this is about, I guess, consistency. It can't be a one-off thing. It's about, on a practical level, striving to do your best all the time. It's about routines, about respectful relationships. On a practical level, in school, it's about what goes on every single day. So in that sense, excellence is something that has to be, if you like, curated, maintained, purposefully sought. It's something you're constantly having to think about. You want your students to feel safe. You've got to put all of the systems in place around things like safeguarding, safer recruitment, lesson planning, day planning, discipline. All of these different things have to be in place to make sure things work effectively. So it's in a sense trying to create a culture, the lived experience of what it's like, and focusing at times on little things. One of my favorites here, punctuality. People are only ever late for my lessons once, or for my meetings once. How do we move from place to place? How do we make sure students transition effectively? How do we talk to each other in a respectful way? Do we follow up on our promises? If we say we're going to do something, how quickly do we respond to emails? So it's that whole culture. And sometimes we talk about a 5-star experience. So what's our customer service like? Starting at the gate. So we actually drill our guards in customer service, because by the time they've got into the school, it's too late if they've had a bad experience from the guards. So everyone has to kind of imbibe this understanding at their level. So we're not always explicitly, but we're talking to all our different constituent groups within the school and trying to get them to reflect on what it is they do. What does excellence look like for them? How do they live the school values day to day? So that everybody is pushing on this. So underneath, it really is about systems. It's about culture. I don't stand there and say, oh, we must be excellent, because that would be a waste of time. I'm there constantly pushing people. Can we get a little bit better? Gradual change. If you're a fan of that Japanese idea of Kaizen, where you have incremental, constant change, always trying to get a bit better, and getting everyone to think about it, getting everyone to take ownership of excellence in their particular area.
You mentioned two things that I really want to think about when it comes to the way you design excellence down from your gate.
Yeah.
I think that most schools, when they think about excellence, they think excellence starts from the teachers in the classroom. They think it starts from the school leader itself.
Yep.
They tend to forget about the gate experience. What happens when we get into the school gate? There are schools where from the school gate, the posture of the security men right at the gate doesn't depict the kind of excellence the school is preaching. So how do you say that you've worked actively to ensure that an average security man who isn't educated get to imbibe excellence? What does it look like?
Okay, well, let me correct a few things there. Quite a lot of our guards are ladies, and quite a lot of them are actually very educated. We've got a couple of guards with master's degrees. So they're not uneducated at all. So I think where we start from, in a sense, is treating them with respect. We make sure they are properly paid. We make sure their company covers their HMO, that does all the right things. So in a sense, we're treating them as human beings. We had a massive issue with security a couple of years ago where people just weren't turning up. And half the trouble is they've got 2 jobs, the salary is too low. So we were able to work with our security provider and increase the salary. Yes, that cost us more money. Overnight, absence dropped to 0. We didn't give the masses more money, but we listened to them, we talked to them. I think underneath this is this kind of a cultural thing, because some people just treat security people like dirt. And like everybody else, you greet them, you say good morning to them, we find out how they are, we are polite, we are respectful. So, to me, I don't think it's a very challenging issue. I don't think this is rocket science. If you treat them well, if you look after them, if you show you care for them as human beings, then they perform. Also, they know I'm very clear. I have standards. If you don't perform, if I catch you asleep, it's not something that will happen twice. So we're very clear on standards. I expect them to be smart. I expect them to be punctual. And a few weeks ago, we actually had the CEO of the security company in the school, and he said to me this same kind of thing. And I said, well, this is my expectation. I go to other places guarded by your people, and the guys look scruffy. The guys are not very polite. But my expectation is they will be. I demand it, and they deliver it. Why wouldn't they? Because they want to do well. But I think that's true of our cleaners, of all of our people. If you treat them well, if you respect them, if you're courteous and polite, you can still have extremely high expectations of them, but they will deliver on those expectations if you treat them like human beings.
Okay. So I'm thinking about this, and I would say that a lot of schools and organizations in general seem to fail on that, on how they treat the security person, and they expect excellence from the security person without creating an atmosphere or creating an environment that allows those security personnel to exhibit that level of excellence they're preaching. Because, like you said, excellence starts from the gate. I was at an institution some years ago, and from the school gate, I could feel that there was something different about the school. Whereas I went somewhere else, and I literally passed the gate without the security personnel seeing me. So I was trying to compare both experience, and I had two different schools in the same Lagos, and I said, nah, something is wrong somewhere. So thank you very much for sharing that. And I believe that everyone on this conversation this evening, either as school leaders, either as educators, can pick something from here about how you treat people. It's a form of excellence in itself. So now, you built Charterhouse Lagos from the ground up, from construction down to curriculum. So what does it actually mean to design for excellence before the first student walks through the door?
So in a sense, that story goes back to about 2018, in China, sitting with the architects in Jinan, a city in Shandong province, up in the north, well, middle of China, and looking at every bit of the school, from how many classrooms to what do those classrooms look like. What's your philosophy around the shape, size, use of natural light? How do we flow from place to place? Where are the bathrooms? How do we look at safeguarding? I mean, it's hard to say, there's a single starting point. I guess in that sense, it's almost how many children, how many classrooms, but then how do you fit that together in a whole? And some of the key things we wanted to do were to make movement easy, to make the environment beautiful. So some of my philosophy has been influenced very much by Reggio Emilia philosophy, from Italy, that sense of beauty. We wanted children to have a sense of quiet, a sense of peace, and to be able to see green. So many schools in Lagos are concrete, and they don't have a choice. That's just where they are. We had that opportunity to make a green environment that was as beautiful as, the buildings and so on. So we've also focused quite strongly on landscape and how the buildings sit within that landscape. We thought about some basic things like, can I move around without getting wet or without standing in the sun? For me, that's a very practical issue in Nigeria. It's either throwing it down or it's too hot. So we built corridors between buildings to make sure you can always do that. We wanted a lot of natural light, so we've got good windows in the school, but protected obviously from UV or too much direct sunlight. We wanted teachers to have a lot of flexibility. And so effectively we built big square boxes as classrooms. We tied nothing down. So every classroom is really just a simple space with lots of PowerPoints, with good Wi-Fi, good light, and then the furniture can be rearranged as the teacher wants. So they can move things around to suit their pedagogy, to suit whatever activity it is they're doing. Even with our specialist spaces, you can literally move everything around because we know teachers change their mind. And I think that's a really good thing. We wanted the children to have the chance to run outside and play. And one of the first things very often kids do when they come here, like let's say on a taster day, is just run around, because we have space. So we've got a football field, we've got playgrounds, basketball courts. Children in Lagos are often quite confined. And so I've seen kids just go outside and run and scream in a positive way, because they don't get the chance to do that. We also wanted to make sure that education was not just about academics. So we've got music facilities, we've got performing arts, we've got sports, we've got swimming, we've got drama. So we were able, and of course this is a financial issue as well, we were able to put all of those things in. We've got some more things coming. We've still got another big basketball court and a performing arts centre on the way. But it just gave us the opportunity to put all of these different things into the building, but in an environment that is quiet, that is serene, that is safe, that is protected. You can walk outside and hear birds singing, and within Lagos itself, that's really quite hard to do. And so I think just that in itself gives children a sense of almost peace and quiet. But there's a sense within the buildings that whilst it's a grand building, it's also quite child friendly. And you walk into the classroom and it's a fun place to learn. So, I've kind of thrown lots of ideas around in there, but I think what we've ended up with is a beautiful structure, but one that is incredibly flexible. We've got a few fixed things, like say our library, but every classroom can be moved, can be changed. And we've gone for bigger sized classrooms so that you can do multiple different things in them. You can change them around. You can do a massive painting project in them if you want to, or you can take everything out and have a dance program. So that flexibility and simplicity in the design has been really important in giving flexibility to what the teachers do and how they use the spaces.
Thank you for that. As you shed light on all those things, I was thinking about design thinking. I think most of what you've done is you did a lot of design thinking stuff about your. And I think it's a concept that a lot of people need to learn, and school leaders need to know about. Not just want to build a school, put a school together, we need to build it. I think most of all this is as a result of thoughtfully designed process of thinking about your users and your customers and your major and the outcome you want to achieve. So I think this is a very good one. And you mentioned something earlier about discipline. You'd agree with me that in most schools, you are admitting students from different backgrounds, different different homes, different ideologies, different countries. Like you have in Charterhouse, you have students from different part of the world. So what would you say when it comes to excellence in discipline? How would you administer disciplinary measures in an excellent way? I don't believe that in schools all children or all students in the school will be perfect. So how do you carry out discipline?
Completely agree, and it's our wish as heads and teachers that all of our children did exactly what they're told. And of course, we were all perfect students at school, but that's not the real world. And the reality for us as a school is we haven't always got it right. We still don't always get it right. It's a huge challenge. And for us, we started a secondary school with 80 new students from 40 plus different schools. And the biggest challenge, it wasn't just about discipline, it was creating an entire culture. Because normally when children come into a school, they look at the older children, they get some cues of where to go, how to learn, how to talk to people. And so for us from day one, it's about establishing some basic things. How do I talk to a teacher? All the things around homework, lessons, how to go from place to place. And that takes time, and and I think with discipline, the key issues are consistency, training and reminding teachers constantly that these are the rules, these are the sanctions, because if in one class a child doesn't do their homework and gets a detention or a punishment, then goes to another class and nothing happens, what are they to think? Which one was right? So a key challenge for schools, and we're no different, is getting consistency among your teachers and an understanding that everybody needs to be saying the same things, applying the same discipline policy, because if one teacher does it differently, that affects everyone. And you know, if you're a teacher and you have the class after the teacher who isn't really strong on discipline and their class is very noisy, it's a nightmare for you as well, because the kids are all excited, are all riled up, and they come into your class and then you've got to calm them down. And that's something you have to look forward to the same time every week. So we spent a lot of time with our teachers working, improving their culture and their understanding of what that looks like. And that's probably been our biggest challenge, is getting consistency with our teachers, never mind with the children. The discipline has to start with the teachers, and every term we've got better. The first term was a huge challenge. Term 2 was still a challenge. Term 3, it's got better. So every time it's got more settled. We've improved our level of consistency. I keep using that word, consistency. So and you know, for the child, they want to go into nearly all of our children are coming to school. They want to learn, they want to have fun, they want to be engaged. And generally they want to have a good relationship with their teachers. And so when children are not behaving in school, you know, you've got to look at it and ask why. Is there an underlying issue? So we're looking at our pastoral systems, we're looking if there's a safeguarding issue. Is the lesson not very interesting? Is the kid bored? Or is the kid actually drowning in the sense they can't come to grips? The teacher has pitched it wrong. They're not differentiating, getting to the level of the child. What I think we shouldn't do is rush out and punish. And very often we hear, oh, punish the children. But you have to understand why they've done what they've done, and how then, by knowing your children, what is the thing that is going to help them learn? Because yet you can give detention after detention. If you keep giving the same child detention, obviously it isn't working. It isn't making a difference. And that's obvious, but we've discovered that this year as well with some of our children, and thought suddenly we've given them lots of detentions. It hasn't changed the behavior. Therefore, that punishment doesn't work. So think again, be ready to adapt. Analyze the data that's coming out of your punishment system. What's going wrong? So if a child is getting lots of detentions, is it because they're always not doing their homework? Well, if they're always not doing their homework, why is that? What are the issues? Are they handing it in? Half the time it's about organization, particularly if we're talking about, for us, year 7, year 8, year 9, so JS1, JS2, JS3, the level of organization of children can often be quite poor. And there's this idea, they come out of primary school, they move into secondary school, and suddenly they turn into highly organized secondary school students. If only that were the case. It isn't. So teachers have got to work really hard in the first 1 or 2 years of secondary school to develop really good habits around organization, getting to class on time, establishing good routines, and just a simple thing, routines. Have you got your book? Have you got a pen? All of those things. You know, I sometimes go into maths classes and ask, have you all got a calculator? So going over those things, have you written your homework down? I think a big mistake schools make is treating secondary kids like 13, 14, 15-year-olds when they've only just come out of primary school and they need so much more support with organization. And that's something we have learned and relearned and made mistakes about, and we keep going back to it, because if you really put that time in to develop that organizational culture, by the time they come to their exam years, it really pays off.
Wow. So the foundational year, which is just 1, just 2, is that time that the school has the greatest opportunity to build the right habits, the right culture. And I think that in most schools, the just 1 year and just 2 year is mostly neglected. They just treat them as, oh, just adapt. Then most interventions are not targeted towards the senior students, which is
I think it's very true. And I think very often what schools do is they timetable teachers with exam classes. I mean, we call it year 7, year 8. They timetable their exam class teachers, and then the younger kids are whatever's left. And used, you know, they fill up timetables. And so I think one of the things we try and do is bring in middle school specialists. So people whose focus is on those first 2 or 3 years of school, of secondary school, because it's a different style of teaching, because it's not just about content. It's about character, it's about organization. So getting the right teachers there, and we know that a teacher that teaches for us an A-level class or a year 11 class and they're focusing on exams and content, isn't always the same one that's going to have the patience to check for the 5th time that day if an 11-year-old has remembered their pen in class. They just think they will come with those things. 11-year-olds don't come with their things, and telling them off constantly about it doesn't solve it. You have to work with them at their level to help them plan. So getting the right teachers in the right class is really important.
Yeah, and I also think that excellence in that regard can also mean that there is no point using the same class time structure for the old school. Like let's say the class start by 8 o'clock and 8 o'clock to 8:40 for the senior students. I don't think you should use exactly the same structure for those who are still in JS1, since they are still coming from primary school. But I think what we have most times is that the school uses a general time structure to manage both the senior student and the junior student who are just coming to the system.
Yeah, and there's an element of pragmatics in that, because I also do the timetable. So we actually have the same timetable runs through primary and secondary school, because some teachers are shared, the dining room is shared. So on the one hand, yes, what we've done is we work on 30-minute lessons. And so in secondary school, we stick those together so you get 1-hour blocks. So the primary school timetable has got shorter lessons, but follows the same structure through the day, because within any school, there's only so much you can do, around timetabling with teachers and facilities. So there's lots of good science around even having teenagers come into school around 10 o'clock in the morning and working till late. But the reality of that really doesn't work easily in schools, and people would really struggle to make that work. So this is an area where you do have to compromise and fit it as best you can.
Thank you very much for that, Mr. John. So we're going to run up soon, but I have like 2 or 3 questions for you.
Okay.
And yeah, one of the questions I want to really ask is about teachers and school leaders putting excellence as a lifestyle. When we hear of excellence, most times we think of it as a very complicated concept that is beyond our reach. We think of it as something that is far up there, and excellence requires you to just do one big thing. So how can you simplify excellence in day-to-day activities, from the little thing you do as a teacher, the little thing you do as a school leader? How can you simplify excellence so you don't see excellence as a very big concept that is impossible to achieve? Because I think that in most organizations where we appreciate their excellence, I think most of those things, they are from the little efforts that different individuals in that organization get to carry out. So how can we simplify excellence at the end of the day for school teachers and school leaders as well?
Feels like $1 million question, doesn't it? I guess it's about consistency first. It's about setting high standards. It's about thinking, really, where can I go? What's the not being satisfied with the status quo? There's a book I like, I can't think of the author now, called The Restless School. And the thinking behind it is there's always an undercurrent that we could do better. We could do more. I think what's really important as well for teachers is to stop and reflect on what learning is, and very often what it isn't. Do we have a clear understanding of the science of learning? So things have come a long way, certainly from when I did my teacher training, however many, it was last century. That sounds like a long time ago. What is learning? And one of the very first things that we do with all new teachers, we have them read a book called Rosenshine's Principles, which sets out how learning happens, a model for how learning happens. Because if you know how stuff goes into kids' heads, then your lessons, your teaching can then reflect that understanding. And what I find far too often in Nigeria, in schools, in conferences, is people peddle theories that have no scientific basis. The best one that is still going around is VAK. Children can be classified as visual, auditory, or kinesthetic. Now, this is a theory or an idea that was debunked, I think, in 2010 or 2012. And yet, I went to a conference either last year or the year before, and people were still selling it. You know, this is the latest education trend. It ain't. It was thrown out 15, 20 years ago. There is so much available online, and yet people sit at conferences and listen to people's opinions as if they're scientific fact. So start by understanding what learning is, so that you understand the process, and then look at what is available online and base your pedagogy in science, in research, not in opinion, not in really nice ideas, but as far as possible in research. And that's a really good place to start.
Oh, yeah. You mentioned the book. Did you say Rose and Child?
Rosenshine. Is there a chat? Can I type it into the chat?
Yes, there's a chat function there.
Okay. I'm looking for it, but I'm not finding it.
Are you using your mobile phone?
No, I'm on my computer. All right, I'll keep looking.
Okay. All right. On your computer, you'll see this chat icon. Just
all right.
below.
I'm looking hard. All right.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that. So, everyone, if you have a question, we'll take.
I found it.
Just 2 questions. Only. So get ready your questions. Just 2 questions, and other questions can be typed in the chat room because of our time. So I have this question for you, Mr. John. Charterhouse is a British independent school.
Yeah.
Model operating in Lagos. What should the Nigerian and African school system take from that model?
Okay.
And what should it leave behind?
So for me, one of the biggest issues is curriculum. Making sure that curriculums teach children to think and think critically rather than simply regurgitate content. That's particularly important. We have constantly in the UK changed and updated our curriculum. We're always complaining it's behind, but there's a restlessness about changing it. So structure, systems, really, really important in the UK now is safeguarding. There's some really great work done in Lagos State around safeguarding, and we make sure all of our staff, not just our teachers, all of our staff do the Lagos State safeguarding, the online course. Co-curricular breadth. The time after school is not just for extra lessons. Kids get lessons, far too many lessons. Just giving them more of the same thing doesn't really help. You need to change how you do it. And if all you give the children is academics, they end up as not very interesting people. So let's give them some more life choices, some different things. Pastoral care, which fits in with our safeguarding program. And I think for us, a boarding culture, for us, we talk about home, not hostel. And I think there's a really important difference. A hostel is simply a place where you sleep at night. We want children to really feel wanted, loved, they have a place to be. And that is a very different type of care compared to what a hostel says. But I think what you mustn't do is just try and be British, because you have to fit within the context. This is Nigeria. My daughter goes to a very good school my youngest daughter, that is, goes to a very good school in London with a rainbow flag outside. I can just imagine the screams if we did that here. So we're very clear, for example, on our approach to those kind of issues. It's not something we do, obviously, here, because that fits with Nigerian culture. We are open to change. You know, some things that might work in British schools simply don't fit here. Some curriculum things, the names of some things. So, you know, be ready to change. And then when you take the actual content of the curriculum, it doesn't always fit. And it always worries me when you see schools, not just in Nigeria, but outside Britain, teaching the Romans or the Vikings or the Norman invasion of Britain. I mean, honestly, what has that got to do? How does a child in Lagos relate to that? There's plenty of examples of these type of things in Nigeria or in Africa. So there's a topic there. There's a very clear topic, which is about invasions. Great. Let's find a local example. If you want an example in geography of a city on a river, we live in one. So rather than use London or somewhere in America, use a place in Nigeria. So adapt to the local environment. Don't just copy British textbooks. Fit the context to your children. And it means so much more to them.
So I think that if there is a very significant difference between the Nigerian model and the British model of education, is the term is now our curriculum. The Nigerian curriculum encourages students to just pour out what they've crammed. They don't really care about application.
The empty vessels idea. You pour it in and hopefully they pour it back out, but
exactly,
it doesn't stick.
It's outdated. It doesn't align with today's context. At the same time, it doesn't encourage students to think. They just pour out. So you teach a student biology, and your exam question is, what is biology? No thinking, just write out the same definition that you've taught them in class. So there is no liberty to even express that child's understanding of what that concept means. But for British curriculum, it encourages students to think. And I think that lack of thinking is what is missing our components in Nigerian curriculum. And we can see the outcome in the quality of graduates we produce. We have graduates who can literally define things, but they cannot think to solve problems. And when we don't have problem solvers, then at the end of the day, it affects the general economy in itself. So I think that if there's anything we need to adopt from the British curriculum is embedding the ability for our students to think critically in our classes, and even writing exams as well. So,
and I would also say invest in teacher training. What research shows is the single biggest influence on a child's learning is the teacher, is what happens in the classroom. So the quickest way to improve learning in your schools is to improve your teachers. Ensure that your teachers are at least graduates. Continue training them all the way through, and make training real. So going to a one-day training course, complete waste of time. In my opinion, complete waste of time. You need to look at training that changes culture over 1 or 2 terms, and you need to adjust small bits, and you need to give teachers a level of agency in that training so that they get a choice about what they are going to change. We use some really great resources from the Great Teaching Toolkit. I'll put that in, and the Education Endowment Foundation, put that in the chat as well. But the idea that sending a teacher on a course for one day will change the way they teach it doesn't make sense, because that doesn't work with children. Somehow, very often we know how to teach children things, but when we look at teacher training, we ignore that. We give them an hour's presentation and think it will make a difference. And then we're surprised when it doesn't.
Yeah, we often see training teachers as an afterthought, not part of the design of the school. So
I think it's more that we don't even design it as training, as teaching. We design it as a lecture.
As a lecture, exactly.
And we know that doesn't work.
And there is no basis to measure the impact of those trainings. And I think that one thing I want every school leader to think about here is this: if you're a school leader here, your management staff here, and your teacher who's going to go up to management level someday, I think when you have the opportunity, don't think of teacher training as something that comes as an afterthought. Don't think about this popular opinion that says if we teach them, they would leave. The question is, if you don't teach them, they'll stay. And if they stay, they'll mess up the system. And I also think that another way to reframe your thinking about teachers training is when you invest in a teacher, a single school cannot solve the educational problem of a country. A single school. Okay. So when you invest in a teacher, see it as you are investing into the economy of the country. Okay, you train this teacher, the teacher teaches in your school for under 2 years, leaves your school, goes somewhere else, translate that knowledge to them there, communicate that knowledge to the new system, and also get to teach others maybe, and the student gets better for it. So at the end of the day, you are impacting not just your school, but you are affecting the education system in general. So I think Mr. John I think would agree with me on that too.
100%. I think as a school leader, I look at the number of my staff who are now in leadership positions. So if I go back to Green Springs, there are 2 people I think of. One who I brought in as a chemistry teacher, who is now a principal or even director of one of the campuses, and one I brought in as a technician who's also a principal. So you look at the people that you've given those opportunities to, that you've grown and you've developed, and it's sad to lose people, and it can be painful to lose people. But if those people go on to lead and you've impacted their lives, they're now impacting other lives and the lives of more children. So it can hurt, but it's not wasted.
So one last question from me, before I take one audience reaction. By the way, this has been a very interesting conversation. And I think that beyond the educational system and beyond you being a school leader, I think everything we've discussed here can be applied in one way or the other. So my last question for Mr. John is this: if every school leader here or school teacher here watching today or joining us today takes one idea away from this conversation, what do you want it to be?
I have to stick to one. I'll give you 2 or 3.
Okay.
Be consistent. Forget charisma, forget heroic leadership, be consistent. Schools are about people and about relationships. They're not about academics, results, discipline. They're about people at the end of the day. And the way you behave, the way you treat your people sets the standard for the school. And I think it's the one place where the leader very much directly influences what the school looks like, feels like, tastes like. Schools very often reflect the personality, the character, the leadership style of the principal, of the head. If you get it right, the school gets it right. If you get it wrong, then everybody knows about it.
Thank you so much for that, Mr. John. Thank you so much. This has been an enriching conversation. So I have a question from the chat room here. I'm going to read this question, and I also allow one or two persons to also ask questions. So the question is, how do you undo, this is from Oluremi Babatunde, how do you undo the mentality of some teachers who react to training as selfishness from the school progress, on the part of the school owners and not a plus for their own self-development?
So for me, in any profession, self-development, ongoing professional development is key. You don't find doctors or lawyers or any other profession that isn't constantly training and developing and improving themselves. If you have a teacher that doesn't want to improve themselves, you have to ask why, and you have to ask, are they the right person for your school? If part of what you believe in as a school leader is that your staff should improve themselves, and you've got a person that doesn't believe in that doesn't share your philosophy, I would suggest that person is in the wrong place.
Simple as that.
It's as simple as that. It's never that simple to move people on. But if they really can't support what the school is doing, why are they there? And what kind of example are they setting to the students? What is their philosophy of life?
Because if you cannot invest in your own self-development, how do you want to encourage students to learn? So I think it's as simple as that. It's not what you can fix. It's a cultural problem. And that kind of that should not be in the environment. The teacher would contaminate the system and even make it worse, transmitting that effect on the students as well. So the next question here is, okay, let me see the chat room. Okay, how can I, and this is from Fumilola. She said, how can I make students who are not ready to learn become interested in learning?
Yeah, it's a great question. The trouble is it's so contextually based. It depends on their age, it depends on their stage, it depends on your subject. You've got to try and understand why they're not interested. What are the factors? Is it their home life? Is it the curriculum? Is it the school? Are they doing the wrong subjects? Are they unhappy for whatever reason? Is your teaching boring? So without seeing and knowing more about the children, I think that's really, really hard to give any kind of answer. I'm struggling a bit there because, there are so many factors involved in something like that. They just may be unhappy from home, but who knows? So I don't think I can give a really good answer to that.
Or they might not necessarily. I think that I would want to support Mr. John on that question. There are several factors, like Mr. John have just said. That child might not just enjoy the topic, the subject itself.
Could be.
Okay?
Yeah.
And they might also not enjoy the teacher. okay? Or it can also be that they have interest in something else. And you might also want to find what incentivizes that child. Sometimes incentives work. I've seen cases where a child who is not committing to learn a particular subject got incentivized, and that child literally started paying attention because the child realized that if I can pay attention for 40 minutes and get this grade, then I'll get something else in return. It can be extra time for sport. It can be special privileges and the likes. Yeah.
Just need to be wary of focusing too much on what we would call extrinsic motivation, because for real success at the end of the day, you need to be thinking about intrinsic motivation. So they need to do it for themselves. Constant reward it's like Pavlov's dogs.
Yeah.
Children will only do it because they get a reward. And what we want to try and develop in a proper learning culture is doing it for the sake of doing it, is doing it for the sake of improving themselves, not necessarily doing it just because they get a certificate or some reward for it. So yes, but don't focus too much on extrinsic rewards. It doesn't work in the long term.
I agree with that. Thank you so much for that, Mr. John. So the final question, which is from Mr. Babatunde Kayode, said, to what extent do your teachers bear direct responsibility for overseeing dining activities, and how does this align with the broader framework of your student welfare and discipline? So I think you want to take this. I think you want to take the question together with the second question. Yeah, so that just becomes a sorry. But beside detention, what other practical disciplinary measure are productive in your system?
So our teachers and our students all eat in the same dining room. We call it a dining room, not a canteen or anything like that. We believe that raises expectations around behavior, around the quality of the food, around the quality of the service. There are always people on duty. So there will be a number of teachers every day on a duty list assigned to lunch duty, and then for the second half assigned to outside duty. So teachers directly involved, along with some dining room supervisors as well. And for the boarders, there are boarding house staff assigned for every meal time during the day. Because it's that sense of we are a community together. So we are sitting, eating at the same tables quite often, eating our meals with the children, because the idea is we're thinking family meals are times when kids are more relaxed, so they sit down and they talk about stuff that they might not talk about in the classroom, and they start to see you as a real person. So I think they're a good time to have a different type of relationship with students. Aside from detention, I think the first thing in terms of discipline is addressing children there and then in the classroom. Because sometimes when a kid does something wrong, you only actually need to look at them. You need to go up to them and speak quietly to them and just remind them about what they're doing, about what your expectations are. We also do suspension. We do community service. We have report cards where children have to get graded for each lesson and comments, and then report to a senior member of staff every day. Some kids have the privilege of coming to see me in the mornings. In extreme cases, bad behavior, children could be sent out of a class to calm down. But I think the most effective discipline is a teacher addressing an issue there and then in class and discussing with the children, this isn't acceptable, these are the rules. And the best discipline is also making your expectations very clear in advance. This is what is allowed in my classroom. Very often teachers will have a set of rules worked out together with the kids it's stuck on the wall. And so the kids become the policeman. You've broken the rule that we agreed to. We do that for basketball, outside games. The kids agreed the rules and they police them. It's far more effective than teachers quite often. They can get quite a little bit too strict at times though. Assemblies, so we have a personal social health education program. All of our assemblies are focused on our values, but they get changed whenever an issue comes up. So for example, last week we had a bullying issue, and the assembly was changed to focus purely on bullying and reinforcing our anti-bullying education program. So for assemblies, we are very flexible and make sure that we are addressing specific needs at the time, but we're always trying to go back. Certificates reflect our values and things like that. Student council runs some assemblies, so we like to try and encourage that student voice. We have students leading shows. Wherever possible, we don't have teachers doing stuff, we have students doing stuff. Because our philosophy is a school is a place where students learn rather than where teachers teach. So students come first, and you know what? They can present things. They can stand up in front of people. It doesn't need to be done by teachers.
School is a place where students learn. Very strong philosophy. I think that if we make that the strong philosophy that we operate on our schools, and always remind ourselves that a school is a place where students learn, it would shape how we create programs, how we design our policies, how we undo disciplinary cases, and find every opportunity or every instance as an opportunity for students to learn. So thank you so much, Mr. John Todd. It's been an exciting conversation with you, and we've learned so much. I had to write a number of things from your session as you were sharing. I think that you are carrying institutional knowledge and expertise that span different countries. Oh, so I'm just seeing that, Chairman. I'm so sorry about that, but we'd have to go now. I'm so sorry. Can you text me the question, please? I'll be glad to send it to Mr. John, and it will send me. I will just reach out to him to please help me just respond to your question via a voice note and send to you. Thank you so much. So yes, we've had a great time. Had a great time learning, and despite the technical glitches, we still had more than 30 people in the room, and that's something for a late minute change. So thank you so much, Mr. John. Genuinely, this is the exact kind of conversation the Praxis series exists for, and you have set a standard for every session that follows. And to everyone joining today, and to everyone who listens to the recording, this is what happens when school leaders stop performing and start talking about what they've experienced over time. So remember that the Praxis series is going to be bi-monthly, and the next session and the guest will be announced soon. So follow me on LinkedIn and turn on notifications so you don't miss it. So thank you once again, everyone. Thank you, Mr. John. I'd like to hear from you one more time and just say bye to all our audience, all our listeners right now.
So thank you very much. Please follow me on my IG, at John Todd CHL. I'm always after more followers on there. But just go out there and be authentic, be yourself, and keep trying to learn and keep trying to improve every day. Well done.
Thank you very much, Mr. John. So I'm going to share Mr. John's IG link. Adeze, please quickly get Mr. John IG link and put it on the chat room. And on LinkedIn is John Todd. Yes, on LinkedIn is John Todd. On LinkedIn, he also shares valuable thoughts on school leadership and his experience leading international school like the Charterhouse. Thank you once again, and everyone enjoy your week. I hope you take this knowledge to your school and also transform the learning experience in your school. Do ensure that you act excellently, you live excellently, and you also embody excellence and become a model for excellence as well. Thank you once again, and enjoy the rest of your evening.